At the age of 34, Commissioner Quarles is the youngest statewide elected official in the country. At this point in time, if you would help me welcome to the podium Dr. Ryan Quarles, Commissioner of Agriculture for Kentucky. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. The only thing you left out is how much student loan debt I have as well after all those degrees. But you know, us in agriculture whose last names start with Q's, there's not too many of us left, and I'm glad you're an Alice Chalmers guy. You know, it's such an honor to be here today. I consider Lexington home. I grew up just a few miles north of here on a family farm in rural Scott County. And that's a story a lot of people can share in Kentucky, especially central Kentucky. Agriculture is very special in this part of the country and also this part of Kentucky. But just think about what we just experienced. We just had lunch. Food is one of the few things in life that brings people together, hopefully 3 times a day. People who have different opinions, different backgrounds, and hopefully they sit around and exchange a pleasant conversation or so. But if you want to get serious about agriculture, you just can't look at it in the terms of food and consumption. You got to look at it as an issue of necessity, an industry that because of how good we are at producing food and raising livestock allows the rest of society to specialize so they don't have to worry about food. And at the end of the day, when you look at other countries that are experiencing food shortages, such as our friends in Venezuela, you know, it's essential to society and it's a part of our national defense. And so just think about how a state like Israel approaches their food security opposed to the United States. So at the end of the day, without agriculture, where we produce the food and fiber and even our clothes, all of us would be naked and afraid. And so we're happy to be here today. So the story of Kentucky agriculture is a strong one. It's a story of family farms. So we have 76,000 farms in our state. 95% of those are owned and operated by families. Those are 76,000 small businesses that populate our rural counties. But they punch above our weight class. Kentucky agriculture is very diverse. We grow everything from apples to zucchinis and everything in between. Unlike our friends in the Midwestern states whose agricultural economies are focused on 3 or 4 row crops and just a handful of livestock enterprises, we literally do it all. And we're actually bringing back old crops. And we do it because we have a focus on quality. And that's something that we'll touch upon here in a second. Kentucky agriculture, our farmers bring in about $6 billion, just shy of that in cash receipts. But when you look at our total economic impact, we have a $46 billion impact in Kentucky's economy each and every year. And if you look at our gross domestic product, our GDP of Kentucky, it's about $205 billion. So you can see that agriculture really plays a big role in our state economy, but also on the national level, because we're responsible for 1 out of every 5 jobs and about $7 trillion of our $19 trillion gross domestic production on the U.S. level. But here in Fayette County, you have some amazing numbers. I pulled these last night. You all bring in $176 million in farm cash receipts just in Fayette County. You have 718 farms, and your average farm size is almost the same as a state farm size of 161 acres. And so you all do it big, and I know it's a recognized part of the Fayette County economy. Kentucky dominates in certain areas. We're a big grain state. A lot of people forget that. We're big. Corn is a $1 billion crop. Soybeans is a $1 billion crop. Wheat, $500 million crop. We have more beef cattle than any other state east of Mississippi, and we'll talk about that, why that's important here in a second. But you all have the horse industry. If you're looking for the highest quality horses in the world, you come to Lexington. And that's something that I talk with Frank Penn about quite a bit. And you all have some signature facilities in Lexington that the rest of the world doesn't have. You've got Keeneland, you've got Fasig-Tipton, you have Alltech, a company that really is an ambassador for Kentucky agriculture to 130 countries right now. You have Bluegrass Stockyard, which is the largest livestock facility east of the Mississippi River. And also you have the premier, in my opinion, research university in agriculture in our country at the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, of which I'm an alumni. Let that substitute my annual giving for the year, if you don't mind. That's on the production side. But in Kentucky, we're really good at transforming those raw crops and our livestock into intermediate and final products. And so here's some things you might find surprising. Have any of you all eaten a biscuit from McDonald's? Raise your hand. If you've ever eaten a biscuit, there's some liars out there, I can tell. If you've ever had a biscuit from McDonald's anywhere on the East Coast of the United States, that biscuit came from Kentucky. If you've ever ordered sausage at any of the 647 Cracker Barrel locations in our country, that sausage came from Kentucky. Each time you fill your tank up with gas, about 10% of that is ethanol, liquefied corn. That corn more than likely was processed down in Hopkinsville. And of course, here in Lexington, we are processing crops we don't even grow in Kentucky. The world's largest peanut butter processing plant on the face of this earth is here in Lexington, the Jif plant. And that's something that I like to point out to people. So in Kentucky, we're not just cows, plows, and sows. We celebrate a diversity because we do a lot and we do it big. My story is not unlike others. I'm the 9th generation of my family to be farming in some capacity in Kentucky. That's something a lot of farm families enjoy and have pride in. Kentucky agriculture is a story of small towns, small family farms, and ones that are connected due to some amazing organizations. So we talked about FFA, but I grew up in 4-H and also FFA, grew up in our local Farm Bureau. I know we have some Farm Bureau folks here today. And I remember that on my farm, one of the first jobs I ever had was shoveling cow manure, which prepared me well for politics in Kentucky. I think that everyone can appreciate that. But agriculture in Kentucky is also a story of efficiency. If you look at where agriculture is today versus just 50 years ago, when my grandfather was farming when he came back from World War II, we have doubled the amount of food we produce. We're doing it with 22 million less workers and only farming about 76% of the land that we used to farm. And so we do it well. 1% of the population feeds the rest of the country. That is a statistic that most countries are envious of. Because of us, we enable other sectors of society to thrive and specialize. Because with the exception of the Great Depression, the United States has never really had a period of starvation. Just ask a World War II generation European about the importance of food. Ask it about when there's food scarcity anywhere in the globe. Because we like to value ourselves as Americans as a society based on laws. But after 3 days of no food, the laws of society break down. So it's so important for us to have a secure, safe, abundant food supply system, and we do that here in America. But we're also going through a period of changes. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand again. Have you ever worked in tobacco? Raise your hand. Take a look around. Now, keep your hand raised if you're working in tobacco in 2018. Todd, I think it's just you and me, buddy. I guess everyone else smartened up. That shows you why we had no choice but to diversify in Kentucky agriculture. In the mid-1990s, we had about 85,000 tobacco farmers in our state. You didn't have to have a lot of land to put food on your table each and every night. But because of the decline in the tobacco market, we had to diversify. And we were very fortunate that the General Assembly, nearly 20 years ago, wisely set aside half of our ag settlement dollars of the tobacco buyout bill towards diversifying Kentucky agriculture. And people like Warren Beeler, I know John Mark Hack is here, my chief of staff, Keith Rogers, ran the department to help diversify Kentucky ag. And because of that, we have breweries like Country Boy Brewing in Scott County and Lexington who've been able to help connect markets with farmers. And we've invested about $1 billion to help improve agriculture in Kentucky. And that's why we have high-quality genetics programs. That's why we dominate the poultry industry. Half of all the chicken consumed in the world has its genetics traced back to Kentucky. It's a reason why we're able to continue to have projects like with the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association to get Kentucky Proud Beef in the Kroger, that we have this nest egg, so to say, this pool of venture capital that other states don't have. When they had their tobacco settlement money, they threw it into that black hole of the general fund, never be seen again. But here in Kentucky, we're fortunate. But we're going to have to continue to use it because we have major challenges ahead. And I'll tell you what the first one is. If you were to ask me, Ryan, what are the two biggest issues in American agriculture? I'd tell you the first one is low commodity prices. We're experiencing a contraction right now with corn and soybean prices. But the second biggest issue is the fact that we live in a society where we have consumers who simply don't know where their food comes from anymore. Last summer, the Washington Post ran a story on the front page that talked about agriculture literacy in America, and it revealed some startling statistics, including the fact that that 16 million Americans think that chocolate milk comes from the brown cows and white milk comes from the white one. The same survey showed that 40% of American school children don't know that cheese is a dairy product. Another 40% of American school children didn't know that a hamburger is actually beef. They thought it was ham. And so when we're dealing with a consumer base that doesn't know the difference between a soybean and a green bean, we have to do a better job of telling our story. And that's on us, because we are a story of efficiency where it takes one person to feed 100, that we have to do a better job. Because when we start having conversations about GMO versus non-GMO, organic versus traditional, when we have to have an intelligent conversation about that, it's hard to have that conversation when people don't know the basics. And that's why we're proud to have 3 agriculture education trailers that traverse Kentucky every single day, where we literally bring Kentucky agriculture into the classroom. It aligns with our state curriculum, and so we want to make sure we empower our teachers to look towards agriculture when explaining those STEM disciplines: science, technology, engineering, and math. Of course, I always want to add an A in there for agriculture to make it STEAM. It's also important to realize that Kentucky, we punch above our weight class. We are a state that has a hotbed of innovation, and we have the history to prove it. Just 4 years ago, there was an Ebola outbreak in West Africa. You probably saw it on the news. A lot of American doctors went over there. A lot of people died. But it was a Kentucky agribusiness that took an unlikely plant, a tobacco plant, and modified it and turned it into a vaccine to help save lives in West Africa. It was here in Kentucky that when President Roosevelt was tired of soil from the Midwest landing on the White House during the Dust Bowl, he sent a guy named Hugh Bennett out to the Midwest to say, implement conservation practices. And because here in Kentucky we're used to farming land that's like this, they borrowed our conservation practices to help get us out of perhaps the largest man-made natural disaster in American history. And of course, with the University of Kentucky and the Extension Office and some pioneering farmers out in Western Kentucky, we invented a type of planting technique called no-till corn, a very pro-conservation planting technique that's been replicated around the world, that was invented right here in Kentucky. So we have a lot of pride. And it also reflects the fact that we have 5 universities in our state that have an agriculture program. We have FFA chapters that populate Kentucky. We have 16,000 young people who wear those stylish blue corduroy jackets on these hot summer days, and nearly 250,000 4-H'ers across our state. It's the reason why when we have the introduction of alternative crops, people look towards Kentucky first. Mr. Quick mentioned hops. This was a campaign promise we delivered on, is to bring hops back to Kentucky. We used to be a big hops producing state until a little thing called Prohibition put us out of business. We're systematically bringing that crop back, and we're connecting our farmers with a growing craft beer industry that has a $495 million economic impact each year. And so right now, in 2018, we have a dozen commercial hops growers growing hops to connect with our craft beer industry. And why is this important? In 1980, there were only 50 craft brewers in the entire United States. Now there's over 6,000. It's going to continue to grow. So we want to literally connect our farmers with an existing market. When I took over 2 years ago, I sat down with the other KDA, the Kentucky Distillers Association, and asked them a simple question. How much Kentucky corn is going into Kentucky bourbon? And they said only about 40% of the corn comes from Kentucky. And I said, we can do better than that. We have the best farmers in the world, and so we've literally started connecting farmers with distilleries. In the past 2 years, the amount of Kentucky corn going into Kentucky bourbon is up 65%, which means about 15 to 20 million bushels of corn are liquefied into distilled corn, my favorite agricultural product, each year. And of course, we're also looking at Canaf, a fibrous plant that our automotive industry is currently using. They're using Canaf in Toyota Camrys and the F-150s in Louisville. But we're hoping they take a look at homegrown Kentucky industrial hemp. This is a crop that literally connects our past to our future. It's a crop that my great-grandfather grew on the banks of the Kentucky River when my grandfather was fighting in Guadalcanal in World War II, a crop that a lot of our elderly farmers can remember legally growing. And this is the crop that I think that Kentucky is positioning itself to be the epicenter of the industrial hemp market. And we're very fortunate that with Senator McConnell introducing legislation to legalize this crop, hopefully this year, we need to prepare our state, particularly our processors, to help inherit the investment that we know is going to come here, because we have the history. Henry Clay was a large hemp producer while he was a sitting senator. 75% of all the hemp grown in the United States in year 1900 came from Lexington and the surrounding counties. We've got the story, we've got the infrastructure, and with your help, we need to help support this once a novel crop and start treating it as an equal, as a commodity that I think is going to take off right here in Kentucky. You know, in agriculture, we're also trade dependent, and that's been a difficult yet somewhat muddied issue lately about knowing what direction our country is going to go with trade policy. I know that our friends in D.C. understand the economic impact of agriculture and trade, because when you look out among the rolling hills of bluegrass and you see our farmers planting corn right now, 1 out of every 4 rows of corn ends up overseas. 50% of our soybeans, again, a $1 billion crop, ends up overseas. 80% of the tobacco that we still grow in this state, which, by the way, is still a $350 million commodity, ends up overseas. It's so important to realize that we need international trade, but more importantly, the world needs Kentucky agriculture in that discussion. Because when I travel, guess what comes to mind when I talk to, say, our friends in the Asian Pacific region about Kentucky? Who's the most famous Kentuckian? Colonel Sanders, agriculture product. They like bourbon, agriculture product. They like horse racing, agriculture product. It's important to realize we have a wonderful story to tell. So that when I went to China on the request of Ambassador Branstad back in November after 18 months worth of work, we opened up the largest untapped market that had been disrupted in the world for live horse exports. And now we can legally export Kentucky proud thoroughbreds, saddlebreds, and quarter horses to China, which this year will have at least a $10 million direct economic impact in our economy. And that's something that we are trying to make our small wins. You know, we talk about it in baseball terms. It's good to hit singles and doubles. Every once in a while we get a home run. This is a home run for Central Kentucky because it will not only benefit our horse industry, but it will also help benefit those farmers that help supply the feed and seed and hay along the way. So we're actively engaged in NAFTA. We're actively engaged in seeing the future of the United States in agriculture with TPP 11, and that's something we're going to continue to have a discussion about. But here on the home front, we're fortunate that Kentucky gets to manage perhaps the greatest marketing program in our state's history. Kentucky Proud. We have over 7,000 members right now who sell over $500 million worth of Kentucky Proud merchandise. And when people buy Kentucky Proud, they know they're supporting a local farmer and local business. And it's important for us to have signature agriculture products. Some of you just came from Idaho. What's Idaho known for? What's Florida known for? Kentucky can be known for our high-quality products besides bourbon, tobacco, horses, and fried chicken. We have the story. We have the products. Imagine a day when we can overnight a Kentucky Proud country ham to a Parisian restaurant or Tokyo with our investments with UPS, DHL, and now Amazon in Northern Kentucky. We need to harness the distribution hub that Kentucky already maintains to help export our goods. But we do have some other challenges. Number one, the average age of a Kentucky farmer is over 60 years old. Name an occupation where the average age is almost retirement age besides the U.S. Senate. There, we have to inspire the next generation of agriculturalists to stand up to the plate and rise to the challenge. That's why I'm so happy to see our FFA members here today. The greatest transfer of land in American history since the Homestead Act, since the United States is literally giving land away, will occur in the next 20 years as the boomer generation transition their farm operations to the next generation. A lot of our farmers don't have wills. If you know a farmer, ask them if they have an estate plan, because you don't want the tax man to come after you after spending 40 or 50 years of your life saving up. You know, there's 5 Ds that break up family farms in Kentucky: death, disability, divorce, drinking, and drugs. The first 3 can be appropriately mitigated with a proper estate plan. So for you attorneys in the room, go out there and help out a family farm and let them help prevent breaking it up. And remember, the next best thing to having your own will is to be in somebody else's. So be sure to get to know them. We've had a conversation about hunger in Kentucky. It's unfortunate that 1 in 6 Kentuckians and 1 in 5 Kentucky school children suffer from food insecurity. I mean, they lack the access to a steady supply of food. At the Department of Agriculture 2 years ago, we decided to do something about this, a farm-up approach. We started the Kentucky Hunger Initiative, a first-of-its-kind effort to include everyone in the food production system, from that farmer who puts seeds in the ground to our grocery stores, to our food banks, our charitable community, our church community, and yes, even our restaurants, where 40% of all prepared food is thrown away each and every day, to say we can do better. We found out that there's a lack of cold storage with our food pantries across the state. So we had Farm Credit Mid-America and CoBank step up to the plate and donate 156 chest freezers to help remove a barrier of generosity and give our food pantries the ability to store safely protein and dairy products. We also found out that there was grocery stores that were afraid of lawsuits, frivolous lawsuits, that some grocery stores are throwing away perfectly edible food into a dumpster because they're afraid of getting sued. And so last year, with the help of our General Assembly, we passed the strongest food donation law in our country. And now they have no excuse but to donate that food. And I'm proud that other states have replicated our language verbatim when improving their food donation laws. We also found out that there's food waste in America. If you add up all the food that was cooked and prepared but not served, it would fill up 730 NFL-sized stadiums each and every year. We can do a better job. We're currently doing a study of our state-owned agencies about food waste in Kentucky to see what we can do to do better. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us. We have a growing world population. We have 7.3 billion people on this earth today. We're expected to hit 9 billion by year 2050. And we're going to have to do something that my grandfather's generation already did. We're going to have to double the amount of food we produce, using less land and less inputs, and be more conscientious about our environment. We have our work cut out for us, but you're lucky. You're from Fayette County. You're already part of the hub of ag tech. And Pierce Lyons was a big influence on my life. I was sad to see him go. I had an all-tech brew the other day with Dr. Mark Lyons, his son, and he shares the vision that I do as well. Now, not just Kentucky, but Lexington can become the ag innovation hub of America because of all the positive things that I shared with you, assets that other states simply do not have. We can become the ag tech center of the United States. So I hope you take time to share that vision, perhaps attend the All Tech One conference next week. Go to Kroger, buy a 100% Kentucky Proud ground beef product in 85 Kroger stores. Go meet a farmer, get your hands dirty. If you're looking for summer help, let me know. We'll put you to work. And be sure to buy a Kentucky Proud, and if you like to eat like I do, be sure to thank a Kentucky farmer. Thank you all for your time today. I'd be happy to answer some questions.
Ryan, I can read these and you cannot, and I will start with the one at the top. What efforts are underway to increase access to fresh foods for low-income families?
As part of the Hunger Initiative, we want to make sure that we give those less fortunate the same dignity that we have and access to high-quality, nutritious foods. And so here in Lexington, you're actually very fortunate. You're on the leading edge. You know, Ashton Potter Wright is here. You can actually sign up for what's called a Double Dollars program at our Lexington Farmers Market, that for those who qualify for other social welfare programs, you can actually double your purchasing power and go to the farmers market like you and I can and buy fresh, local food at a competitive rate. That's one example of what we're doing. Another one is Glean Kentucky. I know we have a representative here with Glean Kentucky. One thing we're trying to do is encourage farmers to have produce that didn't make it to the grocery store, that's perfectly fine, perfectly edible, maybe too small, maybe too big, maybe a small blemish on it, to allow gleaning organizations to come on their farm, harvest that food, and get it to our food banks and distribute it across Kentucky. And that's something we've had a lot of success with. And the final thing is we have what's called the Farm to Food Banks Trust Fund, which is generally funded by the Kentucky General Assembly and other donations, where we actually compensate farmers at a below-market rate to help sell that produce that would otherwise rot in the field and get it to the hands of those less fortunate.
All right, here's a Fayette County kind of question. How do we balance protecting our productive agricultural land while growing appropriately?
It's very important to realize that farmland is being gobbled up across the United States right now. Within the bluegrass savanna, which geologically is what we are here in central Kentucky, we have some of the best and highest quality soils in America right here. It's important that we have plans such as PDR, You're fortunate that here in Fayette County, you actually have much desperately needed resources that are dedicated towards protecting purchasing land and development rights. We're trying to work on it with the surrounding counties. The last time we went in Georgetown is have another Nicholasville Road up to pretty old Georgetown where I'm from. And so it's important that we balance this. But the other thing to realize is that the farmers are generous. There's a lot of farmers who are willingly donating their development and purchasing rights to conservation efforts. And that's something you see Fayette County leading that other communities simply aren't doing.
And what are your top 3 priorities as commissioner for 2018?
Number 1 is trade. We've been assisting the United States Ambassador to Canada, Ambassador Kelly Craft, who will be helping out the next round of talks in D.C. later this week, to make sure that we remember that Kentucky agriculture is not an island. We're part of the greater global economy. We're going to Canada next month with the first ever agriculture mission north of the border. I know some folks in this room are coming with me, and help maintain relationships and perhaps build some businesses. 20% of all of our agriculture exports in Kentucky go north. We even send them bourbon. They send down an imitation bourbon back down. And so that's number 1. Number 2, this Kentucky Proud Beef program is big. If you really want to support a Kentucky cattle farmer, which half of all farms have cattle on it in our state, go to Kroger and pick up some delicious 80/20 ground beef, because it's not just a concept anymore. This is real. We're able to keep those cattle from being pushed out to the Midwest to be finished off, fattened up, processed, and shipped back. We're keeping them here. And if you want to support a farmer, support something that the Ag Development Board and Kentucky Cattlemen Association and I have been working on for some time. And then finally, again, we want to continue to address the agriculture literacy issue in Kentucky and help promote agriculture to young people.
Well, that's a question we have up here. How do you encourage more youth to become active in agriculture?
Well, number 1, get them some dirt and get them some seeds and let them have some fun. FFA, not everyone has the opportunity to grow up in FFA, but if you want to learn about running a business, if you want to learn about developing character, as my dad would say, on the farm, or if you want to learn about leadership, get involved in 4-H and FFA. That's the number 1 thing we can do. And for those of you who have farm trucks and farm license plates on your vehicles, each spring you have the opportunity to donate to the future of Kentucky agriculture. It's called the Ag Tag program. A voluntary $10 donation is divided equally between Kentucky 4-H, FFA, and Kentucky Proud. And last year we raised over $630,000 to be split evenly. And that was the generosity of the farm community. But if you have one of those farm license plates, be sure to chip in an extra $10 to help out and support the future.
Well, you can't see it, but the top question right now is, how are you preparing yourself as a possible 2019 gubernatorial candidate?
Let me be clear. I am running for re-election for the Commissioner of Agriculture.
Fair enough. How is the Department of Ag working to improve school lunches?
In almost every county, the school system is the biggest buyer of food. But yet, due to federal regulation, it is extremely hard to get Kentucky farmers who may be just a mile down the road to sell their safe, nutritious product into the school system. So we're working with Secretary Sonny Perdue and our friends in D.C. to help relax those rules. It's important to realize that we have over, I think, close to 900 schools in Kentucky that have a farm-to-school program. Some here in Lexington are the best, where they're actually buying from their farmers market. They're highlighting which farm it came from and serving it to young people. Because right now, about $1 trillion is spent by the millennials on food in America. Almost all of them get their information from this. And a lot of time that information is wrong. And when there's more millennials in the United States than there are baby boomers at their peak, we have 78 million millennials in the United States, it's important that we have farm-to-school programs so that we encourage those young people to choose a nutritious diet at a young age, so that the next time mom or dad or whoever is taking care of them goes to the grocery store, they say, pick up a gallon of milk instead of something else.
Fair enough. What are your thoughts on medical and recreational marijuana?
Right now, the Kentucky Department of Agriculture is focused entirely on industrial hemp. We're very fortunate that in Kentucky we have a reputation that because we're a pastry dish that only has hemp in it, that we can become the epicenter of hemp. And right now we're focused just on that enterprise, an enterprise that sold $17 million worth of product last year alone. There's a company here in this room that's hired a dozen people since January 1st, just in industrial hemp. And so I think we need to stay the course at least with the Department of Agriculture, and help an industry that already is coming to our state.
You mentioned encouraging Lexington to become the ag tech hub. What are the barriers between here and there to achieve that?
Well, I think there's going to be a race. You know, if you look at Silicon Valley, obviously they have the critical mass for ag tech. There are other countries that Dr. Mark Lyons talked about a few weeks ago that kind of have the edge on us. If you want to talk about agriculture in Europe, you go to the Netherlands. Another big hub would be China right now. The amount of investment going to China in agriculture right now dwarfs what's happening in the United States. But if we want to get out in the lead, we need to make sure that our economic portfolio and our incentives package that we already offer other businesses align perfectly with agriculture as well. And it's also important for us to tell our story because we have those, we already have those tools in the toolbox that other states don't have, including University of Kentucky. We have Alltech. We have a lot of young people entering agriculture that have no agriculture background. We actually have a venture capitalist firm in Louisville that invests only in ag tech, located right here in Kentucky. And so it's important for us to attract those accelerators before other states get it.
You mentioned the diversification that's taken place post dependence on tobacco. How do you see Kentucky ag crops changing in the next 10 years?
I think you're going to continue to see an emphasis on value added. As Warren Beeler and I talk about a lot, instead of just raising your sheep or your goats, think about marketing them, finishing them out, and selling it underneath a Quarles Farm banner. I think you're going to see a lot more emphasis on farmers becoming clever, particularly as their children come back, to help save family farms. There's a dairy down in Bowling Green called Cheney's Dairy Barn. His daughters came back, and as you probably see in the news, it's a bad time for the dairy industry right now. They saved their family farm by not just selling fluid milk, but they're making ice cream there, and they're selling it in the school systems. And so those are the types of stories that's going to help save family farms. And then finally, you're going to continue to see our march towards efficiency in Kentucky, and because we have a reputation of being early adopters of technology. You know, we were strapping GPS units on our tractors long before Siri told us where to go. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in. And the fact that the equivalent of the Detroit Auto Show for tractors and farm equipment is held in Louisville each and every year is something we need to use towards our advantage. And by the way, it always occurs during Valentine's Day. So if you want to say I love you to your sweetie pie, take them to go look at tractors in Louisville at the Farm Machinery Show.
How is your department working collaboratively with other state agencies like tourism, economic development, and education to support the ag sector?
Well, number one, we're making sure that our ag curriculum aligns with what teachers are required to teach in the classroom. We want to make sure that we have relevance and there's significance when we go to the school. On tourism, you know, we have bourbonism in Kentucky now. People come here as a destination to see our vineyards, to see our bourbon, to see our horses. We want to make sure that our tourism goals align with Commissioner Kristen Branscombe over at tourism right now as well. And then finally, public health. A lot of people forget. My office also includes the Office of State Veterinarian. So any contagious disease that enters Kentucky through livestock, we have authority over and jurisdiction over. We're fortunate that we have a guy named Dr. Stout who oversees that. And the fact that we have so many cattle, so much livestock here, that we need to be prepared. And so we actually work with the Department of Family Health and Consumer Protection as well. And so the past 2 years, when we spray for mosquitoes, we're actually also spraying in areas where there have been people affected by the Zika virus. And so a lot of folks forget that we also play a public protection role at the Department of Agriculture. In fact, if you were to ride a Ferris wheel, rent an inflatable for your backyard birthday party, if you were to check out at a grocery store or any Walmart, if you were to buy gas in Kentucky, if you were to fly out the Bluegrass Airport, it's the Department of Agriculture that plays a consumer protection role.
While you're running for re-election, what do you think will happen if Matt Bevin doesn't run for his own re-election in 2019?
I'm going to have to refer you to someone else on that answer.
Fair enough.
You know, it's an interesting time in Kentucky politics. I'm just fortunate to be where I'm at. In agriculture, we're bipartisan, but perhaps nonpartisan. That's the best way to describe it. And I see a lot of friends in the audience today. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm focused on playing my own sandbox right now.
Fair enough. How about one more? What do you feel is the largest issue facing Kentucky agriculture, and how do you propose to resolve it?
I think the biggest issue is telling our story. You know, the average distance food travels from the farm gate to the dinner plate is 1,500 miles. You've got people who are misinformed by bad science, who get their information off social media, that, in my opinion, has been devastating towards the American farmer, because it already puts us behind when telling our story, and people have these misperceptions about what's in their food. But I think as we continue to go forward, we got to be responsive towards consumer needs. And we have a consumer that wants to know where their food comes from. They want to know the production techniques. They want to know the livestock standards and handling that maybe cattle farm or hog farm or chicken plant had. They want to know that. And I think that their farm community, we need to be more receptive towards what consumers want, but at the same time promoting real science, but also be responsive towards consumer needs. And the last thing I have to say, it's planting time in Kentucky. We have a lot of farmers moving big pieces of machinery here on these rural roads in Fayette County. We want to get home safely to our families just like you do. So please share the road. And it's an honor to be here today. If I can be of any help to you, don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you very much.